We will not see diseases like the coronavirus come here. We will not see terrorism come here. And isn't that refreshing when contrasting it with the awful presidency of President Obama? This is a president that constantly has things made up about him. The president is lied about constantly. This is why Harvard, by the way, says 90% of the news coverage of the president is negative. Not my words, Harvard's
that's
words.
not what Harvard said. Harvard said 90% of the coverage is negative. They didn't say why. The why is his mouth and his actions.
American people to trust or believe what is said here or what is said by the president.
There's no denying that CNN, that the Washington Post, that the New York Times have all displayed malicious intent. They knowingly publish false information.
This is no one's fault but the deranged maniac that is sending those pipe bombs.
But CNN is culpable. Let me just add this.
CNN is culpable? You want to be on the record saying that a pipe bomb showed up in CNN?
No, not culpable for the pipe bomb. Culpable for the rhetoric that we are seeing back and forth. I don't think he was condoning sexual assault. He said he starts to kiss a woman and then they let him do X, Y, or Z. That implies consent, first of all. I don't think he was advocating sexual assault. You might think he's gone around assaulting women. I don't think that's the case. You had President Obama, who after I believe it was the beheading of Daniel Pearl, spoke to how upset he was about that, then rushed off to a golf game. President Trump rescinded the Obama guidelines on transgender, and let's be very clear why he did that. President Obama acted lawlessly. I think in this case, this accusation is far more accurate than Donald Trump being an ISIS propaganda.
ISIS.
The media's best hope is for Donald Trump to suspend his rallies. They've been wanting him to stop this. They know it's his avenue to speak directly to the American people. So we're going to follow the president's lead. We're not going to cave to the media. The president is the best authority on this issue.
Kayleigh, I don't know you. Seriously, do you have any integrity at all? I am keeping it professional. She's the one lying.
So that is Kayleigh McEnany. She's President Trump's fourth press secretary. Thank you to producer Michael Lester for assembling those clips so beautifully. President Trump has had 4 press secretaries in under 4 years, and today Press Secretary McEnany will hold her first White House press briefing. It is the first White House press secretary daily briefing in 417 days. And we are expecting her out at any moment. Please excuse as I make adjustments to my screen here. All right. So, again, if you are just joining us, I am NowThis senior politics producer, Alan Piper, and the NowThis newsroom and I will be fact-checking White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany's first ever press briefing. President Trump will be doing a separate event later today. That is at 4:15, and we will be fact-checking that as well. Now, while we're waiting for the press secretary to take reporters' questions, we will take yours, so please type them in the comments. We are expecting White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany at any moment. Until recently, as the introductory video suggested, she was the press secretary for President Trump's re-election campaign. She's a former TV pundit who's made many appearances on Fox News, and she has a history of helping spread the racist birther conspiracy theories about President Obama. That video began with a clip of her on February 25th appearing on Fox Business, where she claimed that thanks to President Trump, quote, "we will not see diseases like the coronavirus come here." It's a statement that hasn't aged well, given that there are now over 1 million cases in the U.S. and over 62,000 people have died here in the U.S. from the disease. But even at the time that she made that statement on February 25th, we already had known for over a month that the coronavirus was already here. So we are expecting her to come out at any moment. This will be the first time that she gives a press briefing. Now, we're hoping that we can answer your questions while we are waiting for her. So please begin typing them in the comments. Now, yesterday, President Trump said that he feels the pain of the losses of life from this disease more personally than anyone else, he says. In fact, let me see if I can pull up the exact quote. So yesterday he said, "I don't think anybody can feel any worse than I do about all the death and destruction that's so needless. Nobody. Nobody is thinking about it more. Nobody has spent more time late in the evening thinking about what's happening to this country." Well, that is a bold claim. I would imagine that the families of the more than 62,000 Americans who've died are probably thinking about it more. I did a look through his late night tweets yesterday to see if there was evidence that that is what was keeping him up late at night, and his Twitter feed does indeed confirm that he is often up late at night, but he does not appear to be focusing on the loss of American lives to the coronavirus. In contrast, just looking through his tweets over the past 24 hours, let me just refresh. I see that 2 hours ago he was tweeting about the fake news CNN. Before that, he was tweeting about his poll numbers. Before that, he was tweeting his support for the armed militiamen who stormed the capital of Michigan, urging the governor to withdraw her coronavirus safety guidance. Before that, he was tweeting about crying Chuck Schumer. Before that, more about crying Chuck Schumer. Before that, he retweeted something from his campaign. Before that, he tweeted an attack on the FBI, calling them dirty cops. Specifically James Comey. Before that, there appeared to have been, he retweeted a video from the Vice President and from the Secretary of Agriculture, so something work-related he seems to have focused on. But before that, I see that he was tweeting about, it seems that late into the evening he was tweeting about Michael Flynn, the FBI's dirty investigation, dirty cops, more on Flynn attacking his own FBI, being tough on the border. I'm looking through. I cannot find anything in his late night tweets, his early morning tweets, his afternoon tweets, any of his tweets showing any level of empathy, remorse, anguish at the state of what is currently happening in our country. Now, the briefing room is assembled. As I said, it has been 471 days since the last daily press briefing from the White House press secretary. While we are waiting for her to come out, I'm going to try to answer your questions, so please begin typing them in the comments. I'm also going to use this time to focus on the timeline of events of what we have seen so far, because there has been a lot of interest in that in our recent fact checks. Again, if you're just joining us, I'm Alan Piper. I'm the senior politics producer. If you care to follow me on Twitter, I am apiper13. I have the support today of our whole newsroom. Everyone here is working remotely, working from home. Most of us are based in New York City, the current global epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic. In New York City alone, we have lost 18,000 of our citizens to this awful disease. We are holding on to hope that the number of new cases seems to be declining. Hospitalizations have been going down in New York. And yesterday, the USNS Comfort, the naval ship that was sent here to accommodate the overflow from our hospitals, finally left. So that is good news. But in the midst of that good news, there is also great pain here in New York. More than one of our emergency medical responders have taken their own lives when faced with the awful sights that they have to see on a regular basis. And a funeral home in Brooklyn received a citation this week when it was found that it was storing bodies in a rented truck because the overflow was so great that it could not accommodate them. Now, Tanisha asks a question about the incoming press secretary. What are her credentials, her experience? And the answer is that Kayleigh McEnany worked for former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee on his Fox News show. You'll remember that former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee's daughter was a previous White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She has some memorable, sometimes infamous moments here in this briefing room. Being the White House press secretary is a difficult role because the president says things that are blatantly not true. And not only does he say them himself, but he expects his staff to say them. Sean Spicer began his time as White House press secretary by kicking off the Trump presidency with a lie. He blatantly, falsely claimed that there were more people in attendance at President Trump's inauguration than at any inauguration in history. The Trump administration decided to argue this manifestly false point for basically an entire week. The first week of the Trump presidency became about litigating the crowd size, and that set the tone for this White House, that this would be a White House that would lie about things that were large and would lie about things that were small, that would lie about things that were easily proven to be false. This should not come as a surprise. President Trump has built his career on making false claims that could easily be disproven. The official height of Trump Tower is listed as actually being 2 stories higher than its actual height. Why would you lie about that? There just is this impulse to lie and exaggerate about things that don't even matter. So, excuse me, I'm getting a little off topic. The subject was Kayleigh McEnany's credentials. She was a pro-Trump commentator on CNN during the 2016 presidential election. She became a national spokesperson for the Republican National Committee and then for President Trump's re-election campaign. As I mentioned earlier, she has a history of promoting the racist birther conspiracy theory against President Obama. She downplayed the threat of the coronavirus on Trish Regan's Fox Business Network on February 25th, when there was already a publicly confirmed case of the coronavirus in the U.S. In fact, there were, I believe, a few at that point. I'm just double-checking the numbers. Yes, at a time when there were about 60 confirmed cases of the coronavirus in the U.S., she made the bold proclamation that we would not see it here. She said, quote, "We will not see diseases like the coronavirus come here." And isn't it refreshing when contrasting it with the awful presidency of President Obama? So we should see her at any moment. I see that they have finished setting the room up. She is President Trump's fourth press secretary in under 4 years. That is, I believe, a record turnover for White House press secretaries. Maddie Green in our newsroom, maybe you can confirm that that is, in fact, the highest turnover of any administration for press secretaries. I'm going to get confirmation on that. This is the first time she's been a White House press secretary, and this is the first time that the White House has held the traditional daily briefing with the White House press secretary in 417 days. Her predecessor, Stephanie Grisham, did not hold a single one. Now, she will be out any moment, but I'm going to use what time we have left focusing on your questions and on the timeline of what has been happening in this country. And hold on, I'm sending a note to my team. So I want you to spend this time answering your questions and focusing on the timeline of the president's response to the coronavirus. Now, the president is going to do his own event later today. That event is described as an event to recognize and honor hard work. He has been celebrating himself as, quote, the hardest working president in history. That is questionable, but that he may be having today's event to honor himself, maybe to honor someone else. We'll see, but it seems to be a celebratory event. He has been trying to frame his handling of this crisis as a success, despite the fact that over 62,000 Americans have died. Now, we have another question. A viewer asks, when and how do we get rid of Mitch McConnell? The answer is that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who has described himself as the Grim Reaper because of the large number of bills that he has sent to a legislative graveyard, is up for re-election this year. Running against him is Democrat Amy McGrath, a veteran fighter pilot. The latest poll by 538, released in February, shows them in a virtual deadlock, with about 40% of support for each. Now, there are two ways that you could get rid of Mitch McConnell as Senate Majority Leader. One way is that you could vote him out of office. Another way is that even if he retains his Senate seat, you could bump him out of his role as the Senate Majority Leader by depriving Republicans of a Senate majority. And that is very much within the realm of possibility. There are a number of unpopular Republican senators facing very tough re-elections this year. Susan Collins in Maine is facing a serious backlash for her votes related to the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh and the tax cut. And now here is Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. And once again, my audio has gone out, so I'm going to resuscitate my audio. We're going to fix this. We are going to fix this. All right. This is, I told you, I am coming to you from my home in the East Village. All right, you're not going to miss a thing. We're going to be live from the top. All right, here she comes. Here's the audio.
So good afternoon. I have an announcement for you on hospital funding as appropriated in the third phase of coronavirus relief. The Trump administration will distribute a total of $12 billion in provider relief fund payments to 395 hospitals across the country that have been hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. These hospitals have collectively cared for over 70% of the 184,000 Americans that required hospital inpatient care. $10 billion of the $12 billion will go towards hospitals treating 100 or more COVID-19 admissions. HHS is distributing an additional $2 billion to these 395 hospitals in proportion to the amount of care they provide to low-income and uninsured patients. This is consistent with our effort to ensure that Americans who need federal government assistance the most receive it. We'll be releasing a breakdown of the states receiving this funding and the counties receiving this funding, but for your awareness, New York, New Jersey, and Illinois receive the most funding by state, while New York, Bronx, New York, and Cook, Illinois receive the most funding by county as determined by our metrics. Our healthcare providers, as President Trump has repeatedly acknowledged, are our heroes as we work to defeat the invisible enemy. This relief funding will help these heroes defeat this virus. In reacting to CARES relief, I love what this one provider said. He said, thank you and God for this relief. I have tears in my eyes out of gratitude for these funds. Thank you so, so, so much. Additionally, 100 flights as part of Project Airbridge have been completed to date. These flights have expedited nearly 1 billion pieces of PPE for our healthcare heroes. The third phase of coronavirus relief also included $320 billion in additional funding for the Paycheck Protection Program, which, as you all know, provides forgivable loans to small businesses in order to keep their employees on payroll. This program has been extraordinarily successful. During the first round of PPP loans, 1.6 million loans were issued to small businesses. Of those 1.6 million loans, 1 million of them were given to companies with 10 or fewer employees.
Okay, well, a little bit more information there. The Washington Post reported today that nearly 300 publicly traded companies got about $1 billion in funds. And because so much of the funds got gobbled up by large companies, many of the smaller companies did not get any of that. And it has also come to light that some of the companies that received the most in funds were companies that had ties to President Trump or to the Republican Party. Continental Materials, which had over $100 million in sales last year, got $5.5 million from the program. And former Trump campaign Illinois Finance Chair Ronald Gidwitz, who is now an ambassador within the Trump administration, is the majority stakeholder. And the company that got the most money was a Dallas real estate firm that got over $53 million. The chair of that company is Monty Bennett, a major Republican donor.
You, President Trump and Ivanka, thanks a lot for inviting us. Thank you, Mr. President, for having us. I love my job, and I am excited about going back to work. At B&Bose, we like to use the phrase called not broken. That means me and all my amazing coworkers are not broken, and we have lots to offer. I know the great country of the United States isn't broken either. So on behalf of myself, Megan and Amy and all the employees of B&Bose, thank you for inviting us over. You guys are a family. Love you guys.
Michael's an incredible young man. I gave him a call yesterday and asked him what he was up to, and he said he and his fellow employees were literally handwriting notes to put in with their coffee packages that they send out to consumers. I received one of these notes from another company, and it really does put a smile on your face. And Michael's doing that each and every day. And Biddy and Bose, they represent the hope and opportunity that is on the horizon for America's workers, as their business embodies the American spirit. Workers like Michael show that this country is not broken.
First. Today, over the coronavirus, is there any serious consideration being given to putting new tariffs on China, or was the president just spitballing yesterday?
Look, I won't get ahead of any announcements from the president, but I will echo the president's displeasure with China. It's no secret that China mishandled this situation. Just a few examples for you. They did not share the genetic sequence until a professor in Shanghai did so on his own the very next day. China shut down his lab for, quote, rectification. They slow-walked information on human-to-human transmission alongside the World Health Organization and didn't let U.S. investigators in at a very important time. So we take displeasure with China's actions, but I certainly won't get ahead of the president with those announcements.
Is the president seriously considering forcing China to pay some sort of compensation, reparations, whatever word you want to put on it?
Again, when it comes to retaliatory measures, I will not get ahead of the president on that.
Thank you, Kayleigh, and welcome to the podium as well. The president said yesterday that he has a high degree of confidence that the coronavirus originated in a lab in Wuhan, China, and yet his own intelligence agencies say they're still investigating. So does the president have information, and has he drawn a conclusion that the intelligence community has not yet?
Look, the president's statement is consistent with the other intelligence assessments. While we continue to have very limited and dubious data from China, current assessments indicated that President Trump's statement is consistent with what some analysts believe is the epicenter of where the virus began. And I would note that intelligence statement you're referring to really made 2 points. One, that this virus originated in China. Two, that it began through contact with infected animals or was the result of an accident at a laboratory in Wuhan. So I consider that consistent with what the president said, that he's seen intelligence suggesting it could be in the Wuhan laboratory.
Yes. Seem to lean into the idea that this started in a laboratory, whereas the statement that we saw from the DNI said we're still investigating those two options that you just laid out. Is the president in any way creating mixed messaging by not saying we're still investigating?
No, let me remind everyone, intelligence is just an estimate essentially, and it's up to policymakers to decide what to do with that intelligence. In this case, the policymaker is the president of the United States, and he'll make that decision at the right time.
Is the president any close to?
There is again feeding into this conspiracy theory that this could be a man-made virus, as something you might see in a Stephen King novel like The Strand. The intelligence community has said that it released, in fact, a statement yesterday. The Office of the DNI said that the intelligence community concurs with the wide scientific that the COVID-19 virus was not man-made or genetically modified.
It's been more than 100 days since the press secretary stood up there. I wanted to get a better sense of what your plan is. Are you planning to do these on a daily basis at this point? Also, will you pledge never to lie to us from that podium?
I will never lie to you. You have my word on that. As to the timing of the briefings, we do plan to do them. I will announce coming, but we do plan to continue these.
Okay, so that is an important note. She has pledged to never lie to the press. We are going to try to hold her to that. Has helped spread the utterly false and racist birther conspiracy theory about President Obama, and someone who claimed on February 25th the virus was already within the U.S., that it would not come here because of President Trump's leadership.
And with regard to vaccines, I would note the words of Dr. Fauci, which are these: going into one trial within 3 months of getting the sequence is unquestionable. The world indoor record. Nothing has ever gone this fast. So what the president is doing, and under the president's leadership, we're in phase one faster than ever before, according to Dr. Fauci, and that should encourage the American people.
The budget, and then there's really...
Well, what Dr. Fauci has actually said are getting ahead of the timetable, that they are in fact opening too soon before there is the reduction in cases that is sought in the president's own guidelines.
Portion of clinical trial.
Yes.
Thanks. The Fed yesterday took an action that appeared designed to allow oil companies to access their lending facilities. So I'm wondering if the president has spoken to Chairman Powell about this, if he's happy about the move, and if the White House is considering any additional assistance to the oil companies.
So I won't get into the president's personal discussions, but I would just note that the president is always looking out for the nearly 11 million American workers in the oil industry. I would also note that we're filling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve right now, 1 million barrels. So that's the only announcements I have on the oil front today. Yes, Halu.
Thank you, Kayleigh. The president tweeted this morning about the protests in Michigan. He has said that Michigan should work with the protesters. He called them very good people and said that they are very angry. Some of those protests, I'm sure you saw, included heavily armed protesters, members of militia groups. I wonder if the president was speaking about those specific members who stormed the Capitol in Michigan when he talked about very good people.
Look, the president was referencing generally that you have a First Amendment right to protest. I think that's something we all treasure here, and we should, rightfully. You have a right to do that constitutionally, but you must protest within the bounds of the law. He encourages everyone to protest lawfully, and also to engage in our social distancing guidelines, which we think all Americans should engage in.
Do you have any response to just the image of people with long guns essentially storming the Capitol, going into face-offs with police officers and intimidating in some ways some of the lawmakers?
Again, the president says, that we must protest lawfully and act within the bounds of.
Yes. The president has said things quite different to that at other times. He has, at his own rallies, repeatedly called on his supporters to act violently against protesters within his rallies. Knock the crap out of them, would you, was one of the things he said. He has promised to pay the legal fees of anyone who attacked protesters at his rallies. He has not made good on that promise, however. So it is not true to say that the president has always supported peaceful and lawful protests.
It has. But we want the American people to be confident in the response of this administration, and that is what he was referring to. The fact that in the average year, the healthcare industry uses 25 million N95. We have delivered in this short time 75 million N95 masks, more than 3 times what the healthcare sector uses in a year. That's extraordinary. It's extraordinary that some in the media were saying that we needed 1 million ventilators.
This is a really striking trope in this administration, is to say that I am doing it. It is not an I thing.
Everything in our power to provide the necessary equipment to combat this invisible enemy. We grieve for the American lives. We've said that repeatedly. I will echo that today. My heart breaks for those. I pray regularly for those who are affected by the coronavirus. But we're going to give confidence to the American people that you have a federal government under President Donald Trump that's going to step up and give the greatest mobilization of the private sector since World War II.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kayleigh. Thanks for being here. President Trump mentioned the situation in Brazil a few times this week. Besides talks of cutting off flights from Brazil, are there talks of, in terms of sending assistance to Brazil, sending PPE or ventilators to Brazil? And is President Trump planning to talk with President Bolsonaro?
Well, the president has mentioned that he has sent ventilators around the world. Any excess supply, we certainly look to help other countries. But, in terms of a specific announcement regarding Brazil, I don't have any new information for you on that front today.
Yeah, Kayleigh, welcome. One of the most important parts of your job, though, is to have access to the president. Can you give us some indication that since you've been named press secretary, what kind of access do you have to the president to get what he's thinking and relay it to us?
Yeah, I can tell you this. I'm around the president almost the entire day. I was just with him before I left to come out and speak with you guys. I think my staff can attest to the fact that they have a very hard time finding me because I'm normally with the president in the Oval Office. So I'm consistently with him, absorbing his thinking, and it's my mission to bring you the mindset of the president, deliver those facts so this president gets fair and accurate reporting and the American people get fair and accurate information. Yeah.
Thanks, Kayleigh. Just following up on Kristen's question, China's blocking the World Health Organization from coming in and investigating how this started. Shouldn't external investigators be allowed into Wuhan to determine, 1, how the pandemic started, and 2, maybe a way that we could expedite finding a cure for this thing?
Look, there's no secret that China stopped U.S. investigators from coming in. It was of paramount importance that we got into China in an expedited fashion, and that didn't happen. With respect to the World Health Organization, they have some questions.
Now, it is also important to note, though, that President Trump did not renew funding for the CDC's pandemic outposts, and as a result, multiple locations had to shut down, including the CDC outpost in China, which could have been providing that information sooner.
Into human transmission. The WHO did not make that public. On January 9th, the WHO repeated China's claim that the virus, quote, does not transmit readily between people. That was quite apparently false. On January 14th, the WHO again repeated China's talking points about no human-to-human transmission. They praised China's leadership on the 22nd of January. On the 23rd, they said, and this is incredible, the pandemic didn't represent a public health emergency of international concern. And even on February 29th, you had the
These are not true statements. She seems to have already broken that I will never lie to you pledge. I'm going to pull up some more information on that in a moment.
By opposing life-saving travel restrictions. The travel restrictions this president put in place, the travel restrictions that Dr. Fauci praised as saving lives. And you have the World Health Organization opposing a measure that saved American lives.
That is not true. So I need to give you a little bit more information about that. First of all, the World Health Organization did not oppose the travel restriction. It just said that travel restrictions alone are not effective in stopping the spread of the disease, and in fact that they were not, as we can see, because there are now over 1 million cases in the U.S. It also is there is no evidence that these travel restrictions, for a variety of reasons, in part because President Trump imposed them so late, actually had an impact. Jennifer Nuzzo, an epidemiologist at Johns Hopkins, says, quote, "We have not seen any evidence that shows that the travel restrictions stopped or slowed down the transmission of the virus that causes COVID-19."
Follow the data-driven guidelines to reopening. All states from Georgia on down the line should follow those guidelines, but ultimately it is the decision of the states. And one note I would make about the president, in times of national emergency, we seem to have had a trend in this country where presidents aggregate power at the federal level, but this president has devolved power. He's invested in a principle that I cherish, and I know many others do, which is federalism, and I think that was the right decision.
Has he mentioned how he feels about Governor Kemp in the last few days?
I have not spoken to him about Governor Kemp in the last few days.
As the on the lines of reopening, as the president pushes forward to reopen the country, does that mean he'll be campaigning in those states where that will be reopening?
So I would refer you to the Trump campaign on that question. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Kayleigh. You mentioned Dr. Fauci a minute ago. Are we going to have any more press briefings with Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and the health experts, or is the White House kind of shifting the message to, focus more on the economy and less on the public health aspect?
Well, let me back up and talk to you a little bit about how we approach disseminating information. When I talk with my colleague Alyssa and we plan out the communication strategy for this White House along with the president and Ben as well, what we do is we say, what is the best mode for the public to receive this information at this time? And we allow the news cycle and the needs of the American people to guide us. And, at the moment, what we see happening, and I hinted at this in my gaggle last week, is you have 35 states, and probably more at this point, with plans to reopen the country. Americans are looking to reopening the country. We've had Dr. Birx in several events this week. They've been Dr. Birx and Fauci out on the airwaves. They're really incredible people and have done a great service for this country. But we allow the news of the day to guide us, what the American people need to hear. And right now we're in a reopening phase, which is why you've seen the president this week with CEOs. You've seen him with small business owners, with small business employees. Today with some great heroes that have emerged from this pandemic and have done a lot of the hard work. So every day we approach this as, how can we disseminate this information? There's a need for information, which is why I'm here, supplementing the efforts of this president to get the message out. I would also note he's the most accessible president in history. Took questions twice yesterday, twice the day before. You hear from him quite often, as well as our medical experts.
So just for context there, Dr. Fauci has not spoken at one of these briefings since April 22nd. The press secretary is suggesting that it's because we've moved from a time of having a medical issue to being at a point of reopening. The fact of the matter is Dr. Fauci told a CNN town hall last night that the reopenings, the states that were doing it, were getting ahead of where they should be. Georgia's reopening began on a day when it reported 1,000 new coronavirus cases. The number of cases in the U.S. continues to go up between 20 and 30,000 cases a day. We're about to cross over into 65,000 deaths. in the U.S. So the idea that the time to hear from the medical experts has passed is a strange one.
Modified. This was from the DNI statement. How do you see this statement? How do you understand this? And also there was a piece in the New York Times that said senior Trump administration officials have pushed intelligence agencies to hunt for evidence to support the theory that COVID-19 was made in a Wuhan laboratory.
I can assure you that no one is pressing the intelligence community to come to a determination. The intelligence community statement stands. It's in perfect concert with what the president said. So, I encourage the media to convey the facts.
Okay, this is not true. President Trump yesterday at his event, I don't know if you want to call it a briefing or something else, but at his event yesterday, he said that he had evidence that he could not reveal that suggested that this was a man-made disease. And that very same day, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence put out a statement saying that they concur with the wide scientific consensus that this was not a man-made or genetically modified disease.
Well, what I would say is that we are pleased that the former vice president has decided to go on the record. It took him less than, 16 hours to follow the advice of the president of the United States and come out and publicly address those claims. So, we're glad to see that he's on the record on this.
Let me just ask you about something the president said moments ago in an interview. He said that Tara Reade is, quote, far more compelling than anything they had with respect to Brett Kavanaugh. What did he mean by that? What is more compelling?
That's the president's assessment, so I would point you back to his words. I think it was a grave miscarriage of justice, what happened with Justice Brett Kavanaugh. There's no need for me to bring up some of the salacious, awful, and verifiably false allegations that were made against Justice Kavanaugh. That was an embarrassment for the Democrat Party to have dragged the name of a very respectable man through the mud like that. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, a couple things. First of all, it's just a petty passive-aggressive thing to refer to the Democratic Party as the Democrat Party, but also the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was not in any way proven false, as the press secretary has just suggested.
You brought up justice, and because, look, there's, again, a case of injustice that is yet to be brought up today, but I certainly would like to bring it up, and that's the case of General Michael Flynn. What we've all learned from that should scare every American citizen. The fact that you had Jim Comey admitting in December of last year that he violated a protocol by directing agents to confront Flynn, something that he would not, quote, have gotten away with under previous administrations. The FBI told Flynn he didn't need a lawyer when they came to meet with him. McCabe told FBI agents that he didn't think Flynn was lying, and then all of that information we've learned over the last few months and years culminates in the fact that we have a handwritten FBI note that says, quote, we need to get Flynn to lie, quote, and get him fired. There was an unfair target on the back of General Michael Flynn.
Okay, General Michael Flynn has pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. He lied to the FBI about his ties to Russia. He acted as an unregistered foreign agent within the U.S. He also, there is evidence that he was involved in a kidnapping plot to forcibly remove a Muslim cleric living in the U.S. and deliver him to Turkey in return for $1 million. Now, this statement that has come up, this idea that prosecutors were out to get him, FBI investigators predicted that he was going to lie about his conversations with Russians and were discussing what to do if and when he did. They did not coerce him into anything. They were, if you've ever even watched an episode of Law and Order, if you think that someone is going to lie, you might, if you think that someone is going to lie, if you think that they're going to talk themselves into a corner, it is sort of just a standard measure of a standard investigation to try to use the information that you have to get further information.
Coverage endeavor to report what is a very scary story when the FBI is saying, let us get someone to lie. I've seen very scant coverage of that. It's a story worth reporting and a story that I hope the American people, if you haven't heard it yet, are getting to hear for the very first time.
Does it think he lied still?
Thank you, Secretary McEnany.
Going back to the South China Sea, we had an issue come up this morning where you had the USS Barry crossing international.
This is Chanel Rion, a journalist for a fringe organization called OAN, which has widely promoted unfounded conspiracy theories.
On the Chinese, as far as what the United States is going to continue doing, is the U.S. Navy going to just ignore these threats and keep going through these international waters? What are your responses to China's increasing aggression in the South China Sea again?
Yeah, I have no news to report as to the president's conversations, and for the specifics of that, I would redirect you to the NSC. Yes.
Thanks. In the same podcast interview, the president said that Democrats would, quote, have to give us a lot for aid to states. I'm wondering if you have any idea of what specifically the White House or the president is asking for, and secondly, what you'd say to somebody like Governor Cuomo, who says, the president's already told me, a few weeks ago that he would support this type of assistance, and why are we bailing out, airlines or defense contractors, but not the states that pay teachers or first responders?
Well, first, you brought up Governor Cuomo, so I just thought it's a good time to remind everyone that Governor Cuomo has praised the president's response in this COVID-19 crisis, saying that what the president has achieved is a phenomenal accomplishment, and we thank Governor Cuomo for those very kind words.
That is a mischaracterization of Governor Cuomo's remarks.
Is something that we want to start negotiating on immediately and get to work on. The president has said, look, I will certainly look to consider helping states who have coronavirus reasons for the financial situation they find themselves in, but he doesn't want this to be an excuse for decades and decades of bad Democrat governance that have run some of these states into a financial predicament. So he has mentioned that in terms of the types of things he wants to see in this phase 4. I don't want to get ahead of the negotiations, but I do want to emphasize that he has mentioned sanctuary cities. This is a really important issue that has cost American lives. Last year, a brave ICE officers arrested more than 120,000 criminals.
So we are pivoting to blaming immigrants again. Now, first of all, there is so much that is false in these accusations that are made against the reasons why states that are suffering from the coronavirus are facing budget shortfalls. And living in a state where we have lost some 22,000 people, it is hard to listen to this administration use this then as an excuse to attack immigrants. I'm going to come back to these points because I don't want to preempt too much of this, but I'll say, among other things, that so-called sanctuary cities and sanctuary states have lower crime per capita than non-sanctuary cities and states.
Misconduct, but per that podcast today, you seem to suggest the allegations that Tara Reid has raised are more, what did you say, credible than the ones against Brett Kavanaugh. What about the allegations that were raised against him, however? Why should the public, or what makes them any less credible than the allegations from Tara Reid?
The president has swiftly denied all of these allegations that were raised 4 years ago. He has always told the truth on these issues. He's denied them immediately.
The president has said on tape before he was president that he sexually assaults women. He has admitted to this on tape. He is on tape. I'll use the words. He was on tape saying, when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy.
4 years ago that were asked and answered in the form of the vote of the American people.
Just come back, Kayleigh, to John.
And there are more than 20 women who have separately charged the president with various forms of sexual harassment, misconduct, or assault.
You have unintentionally misled him. That's now 3 years after the fact. But the two things that could have been true at the same time were that Flynn lied to the vice president and also lied to the FBI. If you remove the FBI piece of that, would the president still have fired Michael Flynn for his belief that he lied at that point to the vice president?
I mean, I'm not going to engage in a hypothetical, and that's essentially what that would be. But what I would say is echo yet again that this was a grave miscarriage of justice. I am very glad that the FBI thought to keep a paper trail.
This was not a grave miscarriage of justice. We're going to have to do like a separate explainer on this topic. But basically, what is happening? I'm going to quote Aaron Rupar, who summed it up well. Earlier today, Kellyanne Conway was using this same talking point, and when she falsely claimed that these newly released Michael Flynn documents show that Flynn was set up. This is not true. All they show is that top FBI officials knew that Flynn had likely broken the law even before they interviewed him. It is not a surprising thing that if you know someone broke the law, and if you know that they lied, you would attempt to catch them in a lie. If you have ever watched an episode of Law and Order, you know that. I also want to quote President Trump's tweet from the time that he fired Michael Flynn. He wrote, quote, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the Vice President and the FBI. He pled guilty to those lies."
About Russia, culminating in $40 million of taxpayer money being lost and the complete...
Okay, also, it is false to say that $40 million of taxpayer money was lost. In fact, the Mueller investigation turned a profit for the American people because of the fines in tax evasion that was uncovered by Paul Manafort.
News Town Hall with the President from 7 to 9 p.m. It'll be can't miss television, and much like the highly rated President Trump coronavirus task force briefings have been. Thank you.
So that was the first press conference from Kayleigh McEnany. Wow, there's a lot to take in right there. She started this briefing promising, she said, quote, "I will never lie to you." And then she said a variety of things that were not true. And then also just really what is so shocking and what is part of what is so painful, I think for many people watching this, certainly for me, and I try not to get too emotional watching these things, but we are at a moment when nearly 65,000 Americans have died from this disease, and she ended the briefing by bragging again, echoing the president's words, bragging about the television ratings that his briefings get. I can't fathom that. I cannot understand. The New York Times did an analysis of these briefings. They analyzed some 28 hours of the presidential briefings. And they found that out of these 28 hours, of which President Trump spoke for 13 hours, so that's a remarkable amount of time. He spoke for 13 hours, where he alone spoke for 13 hours, while Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx spoke for a combined 8. During those 13 hours, he devoted about 4.5 minutes to expressing condolences to families who had lost people. 4.5 minutes out of 13 hours. During this time, he congratulated himself for his handling on more than 600 separate occasions. Now, there are a lot of things going on here. The president is going to do his own event at about 4 p.m. today. I think it's currently scheduled for 4:15. We will be fact-checking that as well. And you should tune into that, not because it's going to be some ratings spectacle, but because we are in a moment of national crisis and something that the President of the United States might say could matter there. I do want to address this issue where both the President and the press secretary and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell have been pretending that the reason that there is a budget shortfall in blue states is because blue states have been mismanaging their finances. The reason there is a budget shortfall in these states is because these states have closed down because of the coronavirus. These states have been the hardest hit. In New York State, we've had over 313,000 cases of the coronavirus, and nearly 23,000 people have died. That's not budget mismanagement. That is a crisis. That is an emergency. In New Jersey, there are over 121,000 cases, and 7,500 people have died. In Michigan, there are 41,000 cases, and 3,700 people have died. And Republicans are making the argument that these states should not be given any aid, that that aid should be withheld for political concessions, such as ending sanctuary state status. Now that is an insult to the people of those states. It is an insult to the families of anyone who has lost someone to this disease. And it's an insult to reason. Obviously, these states are going to have budget shortfalls because their regular streams of revenue are cut off. They're not making money from sales taxes or payroll taxes or fees. And they are spending tons of money on hospitals, on first responders. And the idea that they should be squeezed for that money is offensive. Especially when you consider that these are the states that always do more than their fair share. Blue states, the large blue states, basically fund everyone else. New York State is the largest contributor to the federal budget. It contributes $150 billion annually to the federal government in taxes. That's about 9% of the total budget. It's about $27 billion more than it gets back. Compare that to Mitch McConnell's state, which takes $37 billion more than it gives. The idea that these states, who actually have been bailing everybody else out all along, if I'm not mistaken, Texas is the only red state that is self-sufficient. Texas is the only red state that contributes more to the federal government than it gets back in federal services. These large states, which have large numbers of the coronavirus because they have the most people, not because of mismanagement, not because this is a disease that discriminates on party lines. These states have had the most cases because they have the most people. These are the states that have been bailing everybody else out all the time. New York didn't try to squeeze any money out of states that had that were hit by hurricanes or tornadoes. You've never seen that. You've never seen Senator Chuck Schumer say, you know what, Oklahoma and Texas shouldn't get hurricane relief money unless we get something from them. You've never heard them say that Plains states shouldn't get emergency assistance after a tornado until they sort out their failed budget issues or until they change their immigration policies. I try to stay very much just focused on statistical facts here, but this extortion is disgusting, and it is offensive. But that's all that I'm going to say about that for now, because the president is going to be back in a little over an hour, and we're going to be fact-checking him as well. My name is Alan Piper. The event that's coming up later today, it's called the Presidential Recognition Ceremony to honor hard work, heroism, and hope. This week, President Trump has been celebrating himself. He's been claiming, he tweeted a tweet suggesting that he is, quote, the hardest working...
And we're very dependent on each person
audio.
in the United States.
He tweeted recently saying that he is perhaps the hardest working president in history, and that his response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been, quote, spectacular. We're going to be back at around 4:15 to fact check that. I had the support today of our whole newsroom, everyone working remotely, particularly Maddie Green, Ian McKenna, Michael Lester, Kavish Harjai, Emily Barger, Bersha Sharma, Ian McKenna, if I didn't already say. That is Kayleigh McEnany's first press briefing. Thank you for tuning in. Tune back in at 4:15. We will have more facts for you then. Thank you.